So good evening. It's a nice experience each time we come here. There's less in the room. People are moving in, and we might be moving out. So this might be our last meeting here for a short while until they finish. I think they're going to start renovations next week or this week. And I don't think it'll be long. A couple weeks probably, and then we'll be back. We might try to find a place to meet in between during the time they're renovating, I suppose, yes?
We'll know more.
We'll know more.
Next week.
Yes. Now, what I wanted to talk about tonight is something that needs going over with frequency. And these are the Bodhisattva precepts, the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, which basically are just the sort of commitments that we make to spiritual practice and to understand what we're doing and why, which is really important because we often sort of take it for granted. And, maybe we feel like we have a meditation practice or something else or a study or something, and then you step back from it and you say, well, what is this for? And we need to rekindle and remind ourselves. And remind is a really good word to put it back in your mind, like remind yourself front and center why you're doing this. And the Bodhisattva means an enlightened being, Bodhi, enlightened, awakened, Bodhi, awakened, Buddha is an awakened one, same word, and Sattva is a being in Sanskrit. So Bodhisattva is like an enlightened being, and Bodhisattva precepts are precepts not that that we make to become a Bodhisattva, but they're the vows and the commitments that a Bodhisattva makes. And that, puts it all into perspective. We don't do this practice in order to become a Bodhisattva. We do this practice as a Bodhisattva. It's a realized practice that you do to express your realization. And that when you sit, and that when you are altruistic, and that when you are compassionate, what you're doing is you're expressing Bodhisattva qualities. So it's not something we're doing hoping one day I will become a Bodhisattva. This is the practice of a Bodhisattva. And that puts it into perspective. I'm not sitting in order to become Buddha, I'm sitting as a Buddha. The posture of a Buddha sitting is not so that I can become or I can imitate a Buddha. I am assuming the posture of a Buddha. Right? And so when you sit, you're sitting, as Dogen says this in his writings, your sitting is the sitting of the Buddhas. It's not the sitting to be a Buddha. It's the sitting of the Buddha. So it's equal. Your zazen is equal to all the Buddhas of the past. But there's really no essential difference to what the Buddha was sitting in that moment that the Buddha sat in one moment. You take one moment of the Buddha's zazen, one moment of your zazen. You don't need to believe it, but they're identical. So the Bodhisattva precepts or Bodhisattva vows, there are 16 of them, and they're really the basic ones that are recited and renewed at different times. Once a month at the new moon ceremony. Every month those are recited and made at certain special times like funerals and weddings and births and any type of significant event, or just on bi-weekly or monthly basis. And we're talking about in an ordained environment, every 2 weeks, even monks and nuns need to remind themselves. And they're sort of like immersed in a practice environment. So if every 2 weeks they need to remind themselves, and they're doing this all the time, we should probably go over these precepts, with some regularity. And they are really what we consider the basic things. The first three are just the refuge of I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, and I take refuge in the Sangha. Taking refuge are the first three Bodhisattva precepts that we commit to and recite. And then there are the three pure precepts, which are, I commit to ceasing from harm, I want to commit to doing good, and I want to actualize good for others. Now I'm going to go over these one by one to try to understand them more fully. And then we have the 10 precepts that are, the first 5 precepts of, I commit not to kill, not to lie, speak untruth, not to take what is not given freely, not to steal, not to abuse sexuality, and to not take intoxicants, to have a clear mind. And then there's another 5 that are added to that, like I'm not going to criticize others and praise myself. I'm not going to be greedy, but I'm going to be giving with possessions. I'm not going to disparage the 3 treasures. I'm not going to speak badly about the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I'm not going to talk about other people's faults. And I'm not going to be angry. Now, those are all the 16, and I want to look at them a little more carefully with you. The first one is, I take refuge in the Buddha. That first precept is a summary of everything you're doing. That summarizes that statement, to take refuge in Buddha, is the most comprehensive, most wide, and most meaningful commitment you can make in this path, on this path. On one hand, Buddha means, yes, historical Buddha. Gautama, Siddhartha, the Buddha way back when, 2,500 years. That's, the narrow view of Buddha. But the wide open Mahayana view of Buddha is the Buddha nature that is realized fully in every sentient being. And to take refuge in Buddha is to take refuge in life itself, is to say life is my practice. I am fully realizing it, and I fully trust, and I fully rely on all sentient beings and their true nature. Whether it's a grasshopper or whether it's somebody in prison for murder, Buddha nature. And I will take refuge and I will commit to seeing that in the world. That is going to be my point of view. My point of view, my perspective of living this life is one of Buddha. And that commitment is something that needs to be reinforced and renewed pretty much not only on a daily basis, but moment by moment basis when you start losing faith in humanity, which is so easy to do when it seems like there's so much trouble going on. And you just think, Buddha, and then you think, okay, maybe I'll go to an Eastern country and I'll find it there. And then it seems even worse, right? There's so much poverty, and there's so much crime, and there's so much corruption, there's so much everything in a Buddhist country. What happened? That's not what we base our refuge on. Right? We base our refuge on, first and foremost, the Buddha of our own minds. Now, we don't seek it outside of ourselves. We first and foremost take refuge in the Buddha nature of our own mind. That as a sentient being, this is what my path has to be based on. If I can't trust the nature of my own mind, there's no point sitting with my own mind. Now, the only reason you sit is because you can rely on that deepest nature, the clarity and freedom and the truth, the Buddha of your mind, the Buddha nature of your mind, the awakened nature of your own mind. And that is the true refuge that we take right in the beginning. First precept, first commitment, first vow. Now, we also have to think for a moment, what does it mean to take a vow or a precept or a commitment? Vow is a word that usually means, I'm making an external promise, like a vow. You could take marriage vows and like you're making a vow to each other or a vow to some sort of commitment that you're making. And So it sort of seems like you're making an external commitment. But here the vow really truly means between you and yourself. You want to realize your nature and to realize the truth and goodness that you are. You want to make a commitment to your life. Like that's what Buddha, refuge in Buddha is. You're not doing this for somebody else right now. Right? You're doing it to free yourself. And that is the commitment or the vow of I take refuge in Buddha. You have nothing to prove to somebody else. This is between you and you. This is between Buddha and Buddha. And that's refuge in Buddha. When you do start to trust more deeply into the nature of your own mind, then naturally your trust extends to others, because you realize that mind is one, that my mind and your mind are not different mind. Yeah, we have lots of different thoughts, but the nature of consciousness and sentience is one. To be conscious, to be alive. What does it mean to be here and now? And is it really so different between you and the grasshopper? You both want to live, be free, and fully experience this moment in your own way. There's a freedom of Buddha in that moment. And when you start to delve into the nature of your mind, and this is what we do in our zazen, you say, I'm not trying to be anything. Not trying to be anything or prove anything. That's refuge in Buddha. Then we go into the refuge in the Dharma, which is the second Bodhisattva commitment. And again, Bodhisattva, an awakened being, an enlightened being. Only an enlightened being can recognize Buddha mind. You can't recognize Buddha mind or have faith in your own mind unless it's a Bodhisattva having faith in your mind, because otherwise it doesn't mean anything. The refuge in the Dharma originally means, the teachings that the historical Buddha gave. Okay, and you can read all the sutras. And you can read all the commentaries and all the teachings from, back then till now. That's the Dharma, and that's useful. It is very useful. And it's actually important and vital to give us a sense of, I understand, intellectually. You need food for thought. You need something to think about as well. Right thought means that you know what the teachings are pointing to, and you know what they're about. But the Dharma means that you have an awakened, you're taking refuge and you're trusting the ability to understand clearly what life is about. It's not just the nature of your mind, but how your mind then sees. How does your mind think? How does your mind see? How do you perceive reality? That clear perception of reality is Dharma. Dharma is the way things are in the world. It's the truth of reality. Buddha is the truth of your mind. So, your mind in the world is the Buddha and the Dharma, which brings us to Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha is the truth of others. That you're not doing this on your own, and you're not living by yourself. That the Buddha and the Dharma only really makes sense when we understand that it's, about relationships. Because otherwise, what? What's the point? What is the point of realizing the nature of your mind and seeing reality clearly through that nature and understanding the teachings clearly as a really correct point of view? Many people, when they first encounter the Dharma, the formal teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings when you learn about impermanence and non-self and dukkha, and you learn about, the Four Noble Truths and, the Eightfold Path. When you first encounter this, for many people, the response is, this just actually makes sense. It makes sense. Makes sense how things are. You don't have to convince me. You read it and it's this is the way, there is birth, there is aging, there is sickness, and there's death. And it's hard. Okay, and it's hard universally for everybody, and we're all left with then having to find a better way to cope, and to cause less harm and to help more. That makes immense sense. And then the Buddha gave us techniques to help to do that, to try to reduce our selfishness and to, live a life of benefit to others. So yeah, the Dharma actually really makes sense. And it also makes infinite sense because it doesn't exclude other understandings as well. It's not saying that this is the only way you can think, and this is the only teaching you can have. But you should, be open-minded as much as possible. There's no saying that this is the only way. And that's also really helpful in the Dharma. But basically our measuring stick, the way we measure the usefulness of a teaching is, does it help reduce suffering and does it increase benefit? Is our love and compassion increasing? And is our selfishness and, anger and harm decreasing? Do the teachings, contribute to that? And when we consider the Dharma, that brings everything into focus. So it's a point of view that is really helpful. There's no longer so much confusion, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, the Dharma gives us a really good answer. It's not an answer saying you need to believe in the Buddha, that's why, because the Buddha said so. That doesn't make any sense at all. What does make sense is, I know what it's like to suffer. I want to suffer less. And I want to be happier. And therefore, others who are just like me, with their bodies and minds, also want to suffer less and want to be happier. And we're all in this together. And that's Sangha. So the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha make a sort of perfect unity, which gives our practice meaning. Without one of them, of course, it doesn't make any sense at all. Your mind living in this world that is made up of others. That's the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Your clear, enlightened mind finding a way to live well in this world and doing it by helping others. That's Buddha and Dharma and Sangha. And that, as the first three Bodhisattva vows, just is, gives your life a lot of meaning and purpose without having to convince you of something that you may feel uncomfortable with. The next three precepts are called the three pure precepts. So we have the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and then we have I vow not to commit evil, I vow to cultivate good, and I vow to help all others. Now, I vow to not commit evil. Evil, again, old word, and we're always doing translations whenever we are considering the Dharma and the teachings and the commitments. We're always translating them. You don't like the word vow, talk about, your intentions, like what gives your life direction. Talk about these as the 16 directions in life, You don't like evil, talk about harm. My direction in life is to cause less harm. My direction in life is not to, cause suffering to myself or others. That's a commitment. It should be easy to make. It may be less easy to keep, but we can start with that, and it will help us. If you just remind yourself, remember that these are things we need to review frequently. When you're starting to feel angry, remember that pure precept. When you're starting to feel really agitated or judgmental, I made an inner commitment to myself for my life to not cause harm. And I just want to live up to that. And I may fail again and again, But this precept, this promise, this direction will help remind me of like what's what. I vow to cultivate good. Now, there are the 3 pure precepts: to cultivate, to reduce evil or harm. I want to not cause harm. I want to cultivate good, and I want to help others or do good for others. How are the second and the third really different? I want to cultivate good, and I want to help others or do good for others. They seem pretty the same, but actually we see a process here. You need first to say, okay, I need to stop causing harm to myself or others. Then I need to cultivate good. What is the cultivating good? Before you can actually like actively help somebody, your mind needs to be clear. The cultivating good is working on your thoughts. I want my thoughts to be less self-centered. I want them to be more generous. I want to be more mindful and aware, and less just working on impulse, on attachment, on the 3 poisons of aversion, attachment, and delusion. I want to step away from those 3 poisons, and that is cultivating good. That is the 5th precept, the second of the 3 pure ones. Do less harm, cultivate good. Cultivating meaning in my mind. I want to be more aware, more compassionate. And then, having cultivated that in my mind, meaning the Brahma Viharas and mindful awareness, it's a lot easier to help others. But when we are confused, and when we are attached, and when we have a lot of aversion, the helping others may be more, problematic and less effective, less skillful. So the 6th pure precept is to then help others, and we can only do that when we've cultivated good, meaning we've created mindful awareness and kindness and compassion in our own minds. And we can only do that when we stop causing harm. And we can stop causing harm when we've taken refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. One leads to another. The next 10 precepts, since I've only gotten to 6, next 10 of the Bodhisattva precepts are ones that are generally kept by the first 5 are the 5 basic lay Buddhist precepts that everybody around the Buddhist world keeps, of not killing, not stealing, not having intoxicants, not lying, not having sexual impropriety. Another one on this there. So they also are considered not only in the not killing, but in the Mahayana and especially Zen tradition, it's I vow not to kill, but to cherish life and to nurture life. I vow not to steal or take what is not given, but to receive everything as a gift. To receive everything as a gift. When I read that precept of receiving everything as a gift, we often think that because I paid for it, what do you mean it's a gift? I worked for my money and I bought this, banana, and it's mine, right? What do you mean gift? I bought it, my money. Yeah, that's true. But that half shekel banana, that banana is half a shekel. And then when you think about, the ship that brought it, when you think about the workers who climbed up the tree and cut it with machetes and who carried it to the ship, and the people who drove the ship, and then the people who drove the trucks to the supermarket, and then, the packaging, and then the cashier, and never mind the rain and the sun and the ground and the trees and the land. Half a shekel? It's a gift. Like these things, everything we use has no price. When you relate to it, to all the interdependency of everything working together, everything that I consider mine is just an expression of that great unity. And that makes it a gift. Conventionally, yeah, you work and you buy things and you own it. And you don't want someone to steal it, and you don't want to take someone else's. Hey, that's nice, gift. No. But we don't ever really own anything, because we ourselves don't own ourselves. We are a harmony of so many conditions that came together without my ordering them. And that, on that level, anything we use and participate in is a gift. And when you see that, it kind of makes our relationship to the material world shift. So it's not just mine or yours, and it's not even ours. That there's no ownership there. There's just interbeing, interconnectedness. And everything we take and use and give is an expression of that. Just like your sitting is an expression of Buddha. So then it makes the precept of not taking what is not given, but rather seeing everything as a gift or not stealing. It really makes it more natural. But that comes from seeing the unity of all things. And that comes from being less self-focused. And being less self-focused comes from creating certain intentions of wanting to help others and, create good in your mind and do less harm, and back to Buddha. So we see it all as connected. Not to misuse sexuality, but to express relationships through kindness and respect. So when we think about relationships, and not just intimate ones, but any type of relationship, we want that to be sort of the commitment we make. It's expressing the harmony. It's just expressing that harmony over and over again. Refraining from intoxicants, drugs and alcohol, or any type of drug. That's a literal one kept in, practice centers. But the positive expression of it is, I commit to clarity. I commit to clarity. That just makes it much more natural. Is a beer or two going to take away your clarity? Probably not. But as a commitment to yourself, a direction in life, I want to be clear. I want to be clear. And then we see that intoxicants are not just the physical drugs we take. The intoxicants are a lot of the messages and a lot of the media and a lot of the things we expose ourselves to. And we start to then think, okay, is this cultivating clarity? Am I clear here? Am I aware? This brings our lives into focus. This is what the precepts do. They bring your life into focus so that you know what you're doing, where you are, and why. And only you can answer that. But these are, guidelines to help you ask that question. What am I doing? Where am I? And why am I doing this? Supremely helpful. The last 5 precepts that are talking very much about I'm not going to criticize others and find faults, and to praise myself by finding faults in others, or to be greedy with my possessions, but rather be generous. Not to be angry, but rather to create harmony, and not to disparage or to speak badly about the path, but rather to try to value the spiritual life that I'm living. Those precepts are really helpful, and they all follow, all of the vows, commitments, and direction we've been making so far. They're just different ways of looking at this one life we're living. And it comes down really to, do you recognize the infinite value of your and others' lives? The infinite value of your own mind, the clarity and preciousness of this human moment you have. And that's what we call Buddha. And when you can fully inhabit that refuge, the refuge of your own mind, then everything else opens up. And that's why in the Gatha, the evening verse, that we say, may I respectfully remind you, life and death of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by, and opportunity is lost. Strive to awaken. Do not waste a moment. That is the Zen verse chanted in the evenings at the centers around the world. And we should heed these words. We should pay attention and take them to heart, because this is the most important thing you can do. And thank goodness we have this opportunity. I hope it'll come again, but I really don't know.